It started with a text that read, "You're staying tonight, right?" Just 7 words, ordinary, casual, but they stuck in my chest like a held breath. I remember staring at my phone longer than I should have, my thumb hovering, unsure whether to respond with a joke or just a simple yeah. I chose the latter. I always did with Jason, kept it short, simple, like if I ever let too much slip, he'd read more into it than he was meant to, or maybe I was afraid he wouldn't read into it at all. Jason and I had been close for years since sophomore year of college when we were assigned to the same group project in a painfully boring anthropology class. He had this easy charisma, the kind that made professors tolerate his laziness and girls laugh a little too loudly at his jokes. He was the type of guy who could walk into a room wearing mismatched socks and a backwards cap and somehow look like he belonged there more than anyone else. Me? I was quieter, observant. I noticed things like how he bit the inside of his cheek when he was concentrating, or how he always tapped his fingers on his thigh to a rhythm only he could hear. I noticed the way he never fully smiled in pictures unless he didn't know the photo was being taken. And I noticed the way I felt when we were alone. That pull. Jason never made me feel small. Even when he was towering over me, teasing or laughing, or shoving a soda into my hand, he made the world feel manageable, like being around him kept the chaos at bay. But lately something had shifted in me. I caught myself thinking about things I shouldn't, what it would feel like if his arm lingered. When he slung it over my shoulder, how his voice softened when he was tired. What it would mean if he ever looked at me the way he looked at those girls. This weekend, we were heading out to his family's lake cabin, a yearly tradition we'd somehow kept alive even after college ended. Usually it was a group thing, beer, barbecue, cards on the dock. But this time it was just the two of us. Everyone else had bailed for one reason or another. And when he asked if I was still coming, my chest had done this fluttering thing like wings trying to break free. The drive up had been quiet in the best way, windows down, music low. He let me control the playlist, which was its own kind of intimacy for him. Every once in a while, he'd glance over and smirk like he was reading my thoughts and not just the road signs. Now, inside the wood-paneled cabin that still smelled like sunscreen and damp pine from childhood summers, I stood awkwardly in the small kitchen, pretending to rummage for snacks while he unpacked in the other room. I kept sneaking glances, watching the way his shirt stretched across his back as he reached into his duffel, the way he scratched the back of his neck when he was deciding which drawer to use. It was ridiculous, really. He wasn't doing anything different. He was just being Jason. But everything in me felt different. And then he turned around, grinning, holding up a faded hoodie. "Bet you forgot you left this here 2 summers ago," he said. "Still smells like you." He tossed it at me casually, but I didn't move to catch it. It hit my chest and dropped to the floor. I bent to pick it up slowly, heart thudding. It didn't smell like me. It smelled like the cabin, like old firewood, and a hint of mint, but he was right, I had forgotten. Or maybe I hadn't. Maybe I just wanted to believe a piece of me had always stayed here, waiting. "You good sharing the big bed?" he asked like it was nothing. "Or do you want to take the couch?" My throat tightened. "Nah, bed's fine." He nodded, then smiled again. "Cool, we've shared worse." He turned back to his bag, and I stood there holding the hoodie like it was something sacred. Yeah, we'd shared worse, but this weekend, something told me it was going to be different, and I wasn't sure. I was ready for that **** Jason, and I weren't the type of friends who had some dramatic origin story. We just, clicked. A shared joke during a boring lecture. The way we both hated small talk, but could spend hours debating movies or pretending we were qualified to fix the world over coffee. I think that's what made it feel real, effortless. By the time senior year rolled around, people had stopped asking how we met. They just assumed we'd always been a package deal. When we walked into a room, people didn't say, "Hey Jason," or "Hey man." They said, "There they are." Like we were a single unit, and maybe that's what made everything so complicated. Back at the lake house, we'd unpacked, raided the fridge for leftovers his mom had stocked, and now we were sitting on the dock, legs dangling over the edge, the water just brushing our ankles. The sun was starting to dip low, turning everything amber and soft, I still can't believe Matt and Derek bailed, Jason said, tossing a small stone into the lake. You think they're finally hooking up? I snorted. You've been rooting for them like a soccer mom since freshman year. I'm just saying, he grinned. If they do get together, I better be best man. I leaned back on my palms, letting the warmth of the woods seep into me. You can't be best man at every wedding, Jason. He turned toward me, raising an eyebrow. Why not? Because eventually people will realize you're just doing it for the speech. That's where you're wrong. I do it for the open bar. I laughed too hard, maybe. His jokes weren't always that funny, but it was in the delivery. That sparkle in his eye, the way he never took himself too seriously. Even when he messed up, he owned it with a confidence that made you forget why you were mad in the first place. He bumped his shoulder lightly into mine. God, it's good to get away. I didn't say anything. I just nodded because, there was something about being here with him, alone. The cabin always held this quiet kind of peace, the kind you couldn't fake. And with just the two of us, that peace felt personal. You remember that summer you broke your toe diving off that rock? I asked, nudging my foot toward the water. Jason groaned. Don't remind me. You carried me back like some tragic war hero. You screamed like a dying seal. I was in pain, man. You were milking it. He looked over and smiled. That crook smile that always undid me just a little. You didn't have to carry me, you know? I know. We sat in silence for a while after that. Not awkward, just full. The kind of silence that made space for unspoken things. That night, after a lazy dinner and a couple beers, we found ourselves back in the living room. Jason sprawled out on the big couch, his legs stretched to impossible lengths while I sat, cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a stack of old DVDs. You still sleep talk? I asked, pretending to read the back of a case. Jason snorted. That was one time. It was every night for 2 weeks. You're making that up? You told me your dream girl was a pizza delivery chick who wore cowboy boots. I have taste, he said, grinning. I shook my head, smirking. You also called me babe in your sleep once. That stopped him. His eyes flicked toward me just a beat too long. Then he laughed, low and careless. I probably meant someone else. Probably, I echoed. Too quickly. My fingers lingered on the edge of the case I was holding. He hadn't denied it. Just deflected. And suddenly the air between us wasn't as easy as it had been earlier. You sure you're good with the bed? He asked after a pause. It's fine if you want space. I'm fine, I hesitated, unless you snore now. In that case, I'm kicking you out. No promises. When we finally got ready for bed, there was this quiet tension humming underneath it all. He stood shirtless by the bathroom sink, brushing his teeth, and I swear the mirror caught him watching me when I peeled off my hoodie. It was so fast I almost thought I imagined it. But something shifted in his posture, his shoulders lowered slightly, and his jaw twitched like he'd just swallowed a thought. We both slipped under the covers, the distance between us wide but not quite enough. I faced the wall, pretending to scroll on my phone, pretending my pulse wasn't hammering in my ears. Then, his voice low and soft in the dark. Remember when we were 17 and you asked if I thought you'd ever find the right girl? I turned slightly surprised. Yeah, why? He was quiet a second. What if I gave you the wrong answer? I sat up, not sure if he could even see my face in the dim light. You didn't, you just said ... it'd take time. Right, he murmured. That's what I meant. He rolled over, back to me. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt unfinished, like a page half-written, a sentence caught in the throat. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to hold back the thoughts that wanted to crawl out, because in that moment, more than any other, I realized I wasn't just hoping for something to happen, I was waiting for it. The next morning started like any other cabin day, quiet, slow, the kind of morning where you forget you ever lived in a world full of emails, deadlines, and traffic. Sunlight poured through the blinds in long golden strips, warming the wood floors and casting soft light on everything it touched. Jason was already up when I wandered into the kitchen. Still half asleep, my hoodie draped over my head. Coffee's almost done, he said without looking up, stirring something in a pan. You still take it with too much sugar? I blinked at him. You remember that, dude? He grinned, glancing over his shoulder. You once made me dump out an entire pot because it was bitterness disguised as coffee. I smiled, rubbing the back of my neck. I was dramatic. You are dramatic. The smell of eggs filled the kitchen. My stomach grumbled, but I didn't move. I just watched him barefoot, hair still messy from sleep, wearing that same old sleeveless shirt he always claimed was too worn to throw out. He looked familiar, and in that familiarity was something dangerous. Something I didn't want to name. We ate in the little screened-in porch out back. The air was cool, the lake glittering just beyond the trees. Everything was still. It felt like the world had paused, like this morning existed outside of time. After we finished, Jason stood and stretched. Want to go check the hiking trail? I think the storm last week knocked some stuff down. I nodded, trying not to think too hard. It was easy to say yes to him. It always had been. We set off down the old dirt path, surrounded by pine and birch, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and moss. I followed him closely, watching his broad shoulders move beneath his backpack, the curve of his arm when he pointed out some deer tracks, the way he laughed when he nearly slipped on a patch of mud. And then it happened. The sky, so clear just an hour ago, suddenly shifted. The clouds rolled in without warning, not rain clouds, thankfully, but enough wind kicked up to make the trees groan. Somewhere in the distance, something cracked loud and close enough to make us both jump. A moment later, we reached the clearing and saw what had happened. A large tree had come down across the trail, completely blocking the way back. Jason walked up to it, testing the branches. Damn, no way we're climbing over that. I looked around. What about the side trail, the one that loops behind the ridge? He frowned. Takes us hours out of the way. You up for that? We don't have a choice, do we? He sighed, brushing his fingers through his hair. Guess not. Hope you wore good socks. The trail narrowed as we looped behind the ridge, overgrown and uneven. The sun had disappeared completely now, and the temperature had dropped. By the time we found the abandoned ranger shed half-fallen, moss-covered, and barely standing, we were both breathless. Let's wait here a bit, Jason said, pushing open the creaky wooden door. I'll text my brother, see if he can pick us up from the back road. The shed was small. Barely enough room for two people to stand shoulder to shoulder, let alone stretch out. But it was shelter. And as the wind picked up outside, I suddenly didn't mind the closeness. Inside, the air was stale and cool, the scent of old pine and damp wood all around us. Jason slid down against the far wall, and I sat across from him, knees practically touching. He pulled out his phone. No signal, of course. I let out a breath. Figures, and there we were, trapped in a tiny cabin, alone in the woods. Silence stretching between us like a live wire. After a moment, Jason broke it. You okay? Yeah, I said too quickly. Just weird day. He nodded, then leaned his head back against the wall. It's kinda nice, though, being cut off for a while. Yeah, I said again, softer this time. It is. My gaze drifted to his hand-scarred knuckles, calloused palms. I remembered how they'd felt clapping me on the back after a bad week, or gripping my arm when we jumped off the dock that one summer night, hearts racing like kids. I wondered how they'd feel holding me in a way that wasn't friendly. And that thought made me shift uncomfortably, heat rising up my neck. You're doing that thing again? Jason said suddenly, his voice low. What thing? Thinking too hard. I looked up at him, startled. You don't know what I'm thinking? I know when you're overthinking, he said, smiling just a little. You get this crease between your eyebrows. I touched my forehead without thinking, and he laughed. See? You're doing it now. I let out a breath, trying to will my heartbeat into something normal. You always act like you have me figured out, he shrugged, his voice softer now. Maybe I do. The air thickened again. Not with words, but with everything we weren't saying. Jason shifted closer, just a few inches, but it was enough. His knee brushed mine, barely a touch, but I felt it like a spark. You're quiet, he murmured. I swallowed. Just tired. Bullshit. I met his eyes then, really looked. There was something there, uncertainty, maybe, or curiosity, or something I didn't want to name unless he did first. Then, without thinking, he reached out and brushed a leaf from my shoulder. His fingers lingered for just a second too long. "You've got crap in your hair," he added, trying for a laugh. But his voice was low, like he didn't fully believe the joke himself. I froze, that one touch. Their brush it set something off in me, the part of me that wanted more. That had always wanted more. I didn't know what made me do it, but I leaned forward slightly, just enough to feel the space close, just enough to see the way his breath caught. He didn't move away, but he didn't close the distance either. So I sat back, pulse racing, trying to pretend I hadn't just crossed a line in my mind. Jason stared at the floor for a long time. Then, he said, almost too quietly, "Do you ever wonder if we're not just friends?" My throat dried instantly. "What?" He looked up at me. His eyes weren't teasing anymore. "I mean, sometimes I think about stuff. And then I tell myself, not to. I couldn't breathe. Like what?" Jason looked down again, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. "Like how it feels different when it's just us. How I notice things about you that I probably shouldn't." I felt my heart pound so loudly I was sure he could hear. You're not the only one." He looked up slowly. Our eyes locked, and suddenly the shed didn't feel cold anymore. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind outside rustled the trees like whispered secrets, but in that old ranger shed, it was dead still, like the world was holding its breath with us. Jason sat cross-legged, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on mine in that same way he sometimes stared at the stars, searching, uncertain but somehow mesmerized. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or relieved. "I didn't mean to make things weird," he finally said, his voice low and uncertain. "They're already weird," I replied, a nervous laugh escaping before I could stop it. "But in a way I don't want to undo." Jason looked down again, tracing a faint crack in the wooden floor with his finger. "I think I've been trying not to think about it for a while." "What is it?" He let out a slow breath. The way I feel around you sometimes." He paused, then glanced up. "I never questioned anything before, never had to. And then one night we were sitting on your roof after that graduation party, and I remember thinking how easy it would be to just lean over and kiss you." My heart seized. I told myself I was drunk, he said, that it didn't mean anything, but it stuck with me. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until it came out in a shaky exhale. "Why didn't you say anything?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Because I didn't know what the hell I was feeling. And I didn't want to lose what we had. I mean, you're my best friend," I nodded slowly. "Yeah, and you're mine." I looked away, afraid that if I held his gaze any longer, I'd fall apart. "But it's not just friendship for me anymore." "Not for a long time?" He was quiet for a beat, then whispered, "Me neither." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of every glance we'd shared over. The years, every moment I'd brushed against him and pretended it didn't matter. Every word we never said because we were afraid to ruin what we had. "But I don't know what this means," he said. Like ... What if it's just me being confused? What if I screw everything up?" I looked back at him, feeling more grounded than I had in months. "You're not confused, Jason. You're scared, and so am I." He swallowed hard, then shifted closer until our knees were touching again. "I don't know how to do this." "Me either," I whispered. "But maybe we don't have to know. Maybe we just ... start." Jason stared at me for a long time, his jaw clenched like he was fighting something inside himself. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed his hand over mine. It was warm, a little shaky, and it felt like home. "I've never held a guy's hand like this before," he said, voice barely audible. "You've never held my hand like this before," I replied, trying to smile through the emotion swelling in my throat. He laughed softly, nervously. "Is this happening? Is this real?" I nodded. "Only if we let it be." His thumb brushed over the back of my hand, gentle, tentative. He wasn't sure yet, but he wanted to be. And that meant more than I could ever say. I watched his eyes shift down to my lips, then back up again like he was waiting for permission he didn't need. My heart thudded so hard it echoed in my ears. "I want to kiss you," he said, breathless. "But I don't know how." "You don't have to know," I said. "Just feel it." And so he leaned in, not fast, not confident. Carefully like? He was approaching the edge of something that couldn't be undone. Our foreheads touched first, a soft collision that sent a current through my chest. I could feel the warmth of his breath, the tremble in his body, and when his lips finally met mine, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, gentle, like a question, and I answered. I pressed back, steadying him with a hand on his cheek. He deepened the kiss, just slightly, enough for me to feel the hesitation slip away. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed, breathing hard. "I've wanted that," he murmured, "but I didn't know how badly until right now." I smiled, brushing my thumb across his jaw. "Same." He pulled back just enough to look at me. "Does this mean I don't know what we are?" I said honestly. "But we're something." Jason laughed, relieved maybe. Nervous still, but lighter. "God, I've been holding that in for so long." "I know, me too." He let out a slow breath, then leaned back against the wall, tugging me gently to sit beside him. I settled there, shoulder to shoulder, our hands still intertwined. For a while, we just sat. Like that, the world outside the shed, distant and forgotten. "I always thought I'd fall for someone easy," he said after a while. "Like someone who checked all the boxes." "Do I not check any boxes?" I teased, nudging him. He smirked. "You check too many." "That's the problem." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "So now what?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I've never done this before. But I know I don't want to pretend I don't feel something anymore." I nodded, letting the weight of his words settle over me. "I don't need you to figure it all out today," I said. "I just need to know you want to try." Jason squeezed my hand. "I want to try, with you." And there it was, not a label, not a plan, just something real. Something honest. The kind of beginning that didn't need a script. Just two people, finally seeing what had always been there and choosing it. The walk back to the cabin was slower than before. Not because we were tired, if anything. Adrenaline still buzzed under my skin like a second heartbeat, but because everything had changed. Jason walked beside me in silence, but it wasn't the silence we used to share. It was fuller now, warmer. His hand brushed mine a few times, each time lingering just a little longer, until finally, he simply laced his fingers through mine and didn't let go. It felt easy. Like we'd done it 100 times. Like we should have done it sooner. "Did you ever think," he said softly as we stepped over a fallen branch, "that we'd end up here? Like here?" I glanced at him, smiling. "You mean walking back from a moldy ranger shed after kissing in the woods?" He laughed, pushing his shoulder gently into mine. "Yeah, that. I didn't think it would happen like this," I admitted. "But yeah, I've thought about it." His eyes flicked to mine, holding for a second longer than necessary. "Me, too." By the time we reached the cabin, the wind had settled and the sky was painted in streaks of orange and lavender. Jason unlocked the front door and held it open for me. Inside, everything felt different. The couch where we used to throw popcorn at each other during movie nights now felt like a place where our knees might touch on purpose. The hallway, too. The bedroom felt like a path to something we hadn't dared explore until now. Jason tossed his backpack on the table and turned to me, rubbing the back of his neck. "So, do we just go back to normal now, like nothing happened?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you want?" "No," he said quickly. "God, no, I just want to mess this up." "You won't," I said. "We won't, unless we pretend it didn't happen." He nodded, then stepped closer, eyes softening. Can I hold you for a second?" The vulnerability in his voice undid me. I nodded, and before I could say anything else, his arms were around me tight, grounding, and somehow still gentle. I pressed my face into his shoulder, breathing him in, feeling the slow rise and fall of his chest. We stood like that for a long time. Eventually, we moved to the couch. He sat with his legs stretched out, and I curled beside him, my head resting just below his collarbone. His arm came around me naturally, like it had always meant to, Do you think your family would understand? I asked quietly, more curious. Then afraid. Jason was quiet for a beat. I don't know. Maybe they might need time, but I'm not afraid of that right now. You sure? He looked down at me, his hand gently brushing my hair back. I'm sure about this, about you. The certainty in his voice sent warmth through my chest. And you? He asked. Is this okay? It's more than okay, I said honestly. It's terrifying, but it feels real. He smiled. Yeah, that's how I know it's good. We sat in the golden light of evening, letting it wrap around us like a promise. At some point, I teased him about his terrible taste in throw pillows. He rolled his eyes and threatened to make me sleep on the porch. I told him I'd only do that if he came with me. He said he might. He probably would. Then, after a long, quiet stretch, he spoke again, softer this time. I don't want this to be something we only talk about here. Like some secret that dies with summer. Me neither. Then, what happens when we leave? I sat up a little, looking at him fully. We figure it out, slowly. We don't have to define everything right now, but we don't ignore it. He nodded, taking my hand again. I want to try. I smiled. You already are. His thumb traced small circles against my palm, like a silent rhythm only he could hear. I'm still scared, he admitted. But being scared with you feels better than pretending I'm not. That line, simple and honest, settled somewhere deep in me. We didn't need fireworks. We didn't need dramatic declarations. We had moments like this, where our fears could be spoken and held and answered. The rest of the night passed with soft laughter and quiet touches. We watched old movies, quoted lines we'd memorized years ago, and let our feet tangle beneath the blanket. He kissed my temple once, awkward and endearing. I kissed his shoulder in return. Nothing rushed. Nothing too much, just enough to say, we're here. And we're real. Asterisk. The next morning felt like a soft exhale. No tension, no pretending. Just him. And me. Jason woke up before I did. He always did, but for once he didn't jump out of bed. When I opened my eyes, he was lying on his side, head propped up on his hand, just watching me like I was something worth studying. What? I murmured, still groggy. He shrugged, a slow smile tugging at his mouth. Nothing, just can't believe this is real. I reached for his hand under the blanket and laced our fingers together. Me neither. The bed was warm from our bodice, the cabin quiet except for the birds outside and the occasional creak of the wooden floor settling. He leaned in and kissed the corner of my mouth, just once, then rested his forehead against mine. We're gonna have to go back soon, he said softly. I know. And people are gonna have questions. I know. He pulled back slightly, eyes scanning mine. You ready for that? I thought about it for a second. About the looks, the assumptions, the things people might say, or worse, the things they wouldn't, and then I looked at him. I'm ready if you're next to me. His smile turned tender. Always. Later that morning, we packed up the last of our things. I folded the hoodie he'd found for me, the one I left years ago, and stuffed it into my bag. He caught me doing it and said, "Thought you forgot about that thing." I didn't, I said. Just left it here, in case I needed a reason to come back. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me like he understood everything I wasn't saying. As we stepped out onto the porch, bags slung over our shoulders. Jason reached for my hand. Not like the night before in the woods. Not hidden, not hesitant. Just real. Open. Like this was who we were now. He squeezed it once and said, "We're gonna be okay." I know. We threw our bags in the back of his truck, then stood for a minute, staring at the lake one last time. The surface shimmered with sunlight, and for a moment, I thought about how still it looked, how calm. Like it had seen everything we were afraid to say, and now it held the truth for us quietly. Without judgment, Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. "I want you to have this," I blinked. "What is it?" "Key to the cabin," he said. "My parents don't really come up anymore. I figured, maybe next time we don't wait for a reason." I took it from him slowly, my fingers brushing. You sure? He nodded. "Yeah, I want this to be our place." "Not just mine," my throat tightened. "Okay." Then, with a grin that was both nervous and excited, he added, "We'll come back in the fall." I want to see what it looks like when the leaves change. And you want to see if I still snore. Oh, you definitely snore. I laughed, stepping closer, until my forehead rested lightly against his chest. You still talk in your sleep? I hope I call you babe again. You did. We stood like that for a moment longer, wrapped in mourning. Light and something that felt like the beginning of everything. As we pulled out of the gravel driveway, I glanced back once more at the cabin. It looked smaller from a distance, but I knew, inside those walls, something big had changed, something we weren't going to leave behind. On the drive home, Jason reached over at a stoplight and took my hand again, just like that. No words. Number. Need for them, and I realized this wasn't just a moment. This was the start of a story. We were finally ready to write together.